being here as a part of our Guiding the Financial Aid Process sort of live stream webinar. So this is a collaboration effort between the DePaul College Prep college and school counseling teams. Just a couple of things as we go through this presentation. This presentation is going to be automatically recorded. And so the link that you are finding us at, if there's anything that we're talking about that you're like, oh, I want to go back to that, this recording will actually be available right after we stop the meeting. And additionally, any links that we're going to be talking about, we're going to be sharing with you in a doc form after this. So links to all of the things that we talk about will be there for you, just in case there are things that you wanted to access. So this is going to be our agenda for the evening. We're going to take a couple of seconds to introduce ourselves as a team. And then I will be talking about the college and financial aid timeline, how to determine college costs. And then Ms. Janik will come in and talk about FAFSA. I'll be touching a little bit on the CSS profile. Ms. Kaushal will come in and talk about like the financial aid offices and scholarship processes. And at the end, we have some questions that have been submitted, so we will make sure to answer those. So I appreciate those of you who have submitted questions to us. So at this time, I'm going to have us introduce ourselves, and we'll start with Ms. Janik.
Hi, I'm Andrea Janik. I'm a school counselor, and this is my 5th year at DePaul Prep.
Hi, I'm Kate Kaushal. I am a college counselor in the amazing DePaul Prep College Counseling Department, and this is my 4th year at DePaul College Prep.
And my name is Samantha Mondro, and this is my 2nd year at DePaul College Prep, and we're very excited to be here with you this evening. So I'm going to kick us off, and we're going to talk a little bit about some different terminology that we have that you'll hear me and Ms. Kaushal and Ms. Janik talk about. You'll see that there's tons of, like I call it alphabet soup. There's cost of attendance, CSS, FAFSA, family size, FSAID. You see all of these different terms. The terms that we're going to be focusing on are highlighted in yellow this evening. I'll be talking a little bit about what cost of attendance is. Sometimes we say COA. Ms. Janik is going to talk to us about the FSAID, which is your federal student aid identification. And then she'll also be sort of throwing around the term SAI, which is just the student aid index. And some of you who have maybe done FAFSA previously for students, it used to be the estimated family contribution or expected family contribution, or EFC. So it is no longer EFC, and now it is the SAI. So you'll see these terms throughout our presentation. And like I said, this will be recorded. So if you wanted to come back to this slide to kind of understand all of those things, it will be available to you. So to start off, we wanted to give you sort of a breakdown of sort of the timeline of the college application cycle and where financial aid kicks into that process. So at the top, you will see everything that has to talk about early decision and different deadlines that are coming up. Like currently, it is October 8th. We are very barreling towards October 15th application submission deadlines. But back on October 1st, technically the FAFSA and the CSS profile have already opened. But please don't fear. You don't have to worry about money running out. We'll talk about some priority deadlines of when you should have FAFSA completed by. So your main focus right now as a family is supporting your students to get those applications submitted. So we have early action deadlines coming up next week for mostly select Southern schools and some ED deadlines for those Southern schools. But our very big traditional deadline is going to be November 1st, and that is typically the early action and early decision deadlines. And so our focus simply right now for most students is to get those applications out the door. And there are also some November 15th deadlines. Outside of that, if students or parents are ready to fill out your CSS or FAFSA, you can do that. You can see that usually December 1st is a priority deadline for some schools for those financial aid applications. And outside of that, we want to make sure that you're filling out FAFSA accurately, as opposed to getting it in. At no time in my time in college counseling have I ever seen financial aid run out, whether it's state or federal level. So thinking about right now, the priority should be supporting students getting their applications submitted, whether it's October 15th, November 1st, or November 15th, and then turning your eyes to those financial aid applications as well. So as you see, we're kind of progressing pretty quickly through October and November as we approach those deadlines. As a reminder, in terms of the application season, you can actually continue to submit applications through January. And if it is a rolling deadline school, you could be submitting those applications into March and April. But in DePaul College Prep fashion, most of our students are submitting those applications well before those January due dates of like January 1st or January 5th. The other big thing that you'll start to see on this after you submit all of those applications and you start to hear back from some of those decisions is that financial aid season begins usually March and April. Sometimes there are colleges that start to send out early award letters in February. And so it is important that we get FAFSA and CSS submitted, hopefully by December, but if you need to take more time, you can. But those award letters start to come out February, March, and April. And then you as a family should be making your enrollment decision by May 1st. That is the national deadline for college decisions. And at that time, you're probably shifting your gears to thinking about housing and all of the steps that come after that. So there's going to be a lot of rush through this beginning part of the year to get those applications out. Then you can turn your eye to financial aid. And then from there, you'll go into sort of decision-making mode. So this is sort of our timeline right now. So I'm going to switch gears and talk about like how do we think of cost of attendance? And cost of attendance is all of the things that are tuition and fees, room and board. Those are the things that you will have to pay directly to the colleges themselves. But the other things that you should include and think about and plan for in your budget is thinking about books and supplies. How is your student going to get to and from campus? Are they going to be including study abroad? And then there's always going to be those miscellaneous expenses, including deodorant, body wash, any of those things. Those are all costs to consider when you're thinking cost of attendance. So please, we're going to talk a little bit next about the sticker price of college, which is sort of the tuition and fees that are involved to be a student. But a part of a student's financial aid process is getting gift aid, hopefully through the college itself in the form of scholarships, grants, and other things. So thinking about, actually, I'll go back to the previous slide. When you're thinking about that tuition fees, room and board, that is the fees that you'll have to pay directly to the school. Everything else you will have to sort of either pay to the organization, bookstore, or wherever you get those other expenses. So think about them as you sort of budget out and have conversations about that. The other thing I want for us to think about, especially on this slide, is that most students and most families are not paying the full price for college. So sometimes when you hear, some schools like Pepperdine of a price tag of everything included being $90,000 a year, most families are not paying that full sticker price. So when thinking about this, sometimes you do get a little bit of a sticker shock, but it is also important to understand that colleges are actively giving their students gift aid in the form of scholarships, grants that they may not have to pay back based on the merit of their application. But there is also money that you may qualify based on need as well. So in thinking about like how much do you think you're going to pay, you're going to take that sticker price, subtract all the gift aid or need aid that you receive, and that will be your net price. That will be the cost directly to you, and that is what you should be budgeting to pay. Now, you may be asking yourself a little bit like, how do I figure that out? So you see on college websites that they usually have that sticker price, that tuition fees, room and board, but it doesn't give you the opportunity to sort of think about and figure out how much the cost would be, particularly to your family. So there are a few tools that our team wants to share with you, and this will be some of the links that we'll share with you, is that there are a few different ways in which you can actually estimate your cost. This first link up at the top is the Federal Student Aid Estimator. That is kind of like a mini FAFSA that allows you to kind of put in your information and have an estimate of what your FAFSA qualification might be. There is also every college in the United States is required to have a net price calculator. The link that we'll be sharing with you for the net price calculators is going to be a link where it will connect you to all of the net price calculators for schools that have them. So that will be a one-stop shop. You could click on all of the net price calculators for different schools, or on every college's website, they should have a net price calculator that you could utilize to understand your cost for that particular school. Some other good places to look is going to be a program that is going to allow you to sort of compare college to college costs based on merit. So Merit More is a really great website that allows you to plug in like GPA and some of that information about your application. And you can actually pick schools where they can give you sort of a bit of an estimate about what your merit money might be. And merit money is going to be the money that students receive from the colleges based on their transcript, as well as their activities and other things that they submit part of their application. A big favorite tool that I share with students and Ms. Kaushal shares with her students is called the Big J Educational Consulting Interactive Tool. I'm going to show you a screenshot of what it looks like, but it is a dynamic spreadsheet that allows you to kind of zone in on a particular institution, a state, a region, and it allows you to see how much need-based and merit-based money are awarded to students. This is an educational consulting company that has run all of the numbers for you. So if you are someone who wants to get into understanding a little bit more about how much merit aid is offered at different colleges, that would be a wonderful tool to use, or even to sort of rank them and see which schools give the most merit money and which schools give the least. Not every single school in the United States is listed there, but a vast majority of them are. So if you want to sort of see how colleges that you're interested in, how they award merit money to their students, this would be a really great resource to have. Another resource that I want to highlight is Jeff Salingo, who is an educational reporter who has done a lot of research inside the world of college admissions. And this is also another resource that we'll be sharing with you, is that sometimes we want to understand the schools that are going to be giving a lot of merit money to their students, or ones that don't necessarily have to. And he kind of links or kind of creates the system of buyers and sellers. So sellers are going to be schools that have high application yield and low admission rate. So a given example of that would be schools that have very big brand name recognition. So University of Michigan, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. This is where a lot of applications go. So think of that like Newsweek top rankings. A lot of those schools that are at the top of the list are those sellers because they have that name brand. Buyers are going to be schools that have lower application yield and higher acceptance rates. So they have to work a little bit harder to get more of their more students onto their campus. And that usually means they're going to offer discounts and merit money to their applicants. What he wants for you to think about is that we shouldn't be applying to just sellers because there might not be an opportunity to get a ton of financial aid, whether it's merit based, but maybe looking into some buyers. If you're interested in that, we're going to be sharing out a link to Jeff Salingo's buyers and sellers list, so you can kind of see which schools are going to be offering more discounts and scholarships to students than others. So just to give you some examples of our buyers, our sellers are going to be on the left-hand side. So we're going to kind of do a little bit of comparison. Like Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Iowa are very big out-of-state Midwest public schools, and their costs are usually a little bit higher. Great institutions, but they're not also going to be sending out tons of financial scholarships to students based on merit because they don't have to. They have a ton of applicants who really want to go there and are willing to pay the prices that they offer versus like Nebraska, University of Kansas, and Western Michigan, which may not have like that big national brand. They may not have as many students applying, but they are offering more merit money to students. So if you are considering like a school like Wisconsin-Madison, maybe also think about Nebraska if cost is of a concern for you. We can do the same sort of thing at private liberal arts colleges as well. Like Denison and Colorado colleges are big brand names inside of those spaces in terms of liberal arts schools. But schools that are closer to home, like Beloit and Knox, may be offering more merit money to students to come to their schools. You're going to get the same type of education, but maybe at a lower cost to you. Same thing with our Southeast. We definitely have a lot of students who are interested in Tennessee and Clemson, which are wonderful schools with great school spirit. But a lot of our students are also thinking about, well, what about Ole Miss or South Alabama? The interesting thing about South Alabama is that if you apply there, you actually get in-state tuition benefits as someone from Illinois. So some of these schools that who are looking for more students to come to their campus may be offering those types of benefits to you. So this is a really good time to think about with your students if you are prioritizing schools that are offering really supportive financial aid packages to you. The name brands are great, but they don't necessarily have to give you those tuition discounts and scholarships where like other places might want to offer those to you so that they attract more students to their campus. All right. So I'm going to start to define a couple of these applications that you're going to utilize for financial aid. There are going to be two main applications that you're going to submit. Most students are going to be submitting the FAFSA, and that's already open on October 1st. In the past few years, it has opened much later than that. So we're happy to have sort of that October 1st opening already moving and grooving. Outside of that, this is the application that all colleges will use to determine eligibility for federal aid. Both the student and the parent needs to create an FSA ID, and Ms. Janik will go into more detail about this in a little bit. And the other application that some of you may have to fill out is something called the CSS profile. The CSS profile is through the College Board, and it's used by colleges to determine the right level of institutional aid for each student. You're going to use the College Board, and you're going to use your student's College Board account to do that. In this case, if parents are no longer together, there is going to be a need for both parents to submit financial information. So that's a little bit different than the FAFSA. And as I said, Ms. Janik will go into more details about that. And some colleges actually have their own financial aid applications. as well. So sometimes they will offer, like I know the College of Worcester has their own form that you can fill out to do the same thing as the CSS profile. So everyone should be able to fill out the FAFSA. CSS will only be needed by a certain group of schools, and then some colleges have their own financial aid application. Just to highlight some differences, I know this is kind of dense with information, but this kind of tells you a little bit about the difference between CSS and the FAFSA application. On the left-hand side, or on the FAFSA part of this, you can see that it costs $0 to file your FAFSA, where filling out your CSS profile is fee-based. So you'll pay $20 for the first application, and every school after that, you'll add an additional fee. You'll see other assets that are being sort of considered here. In terms of income review, it is very easy to pull in information on the FAFSA from the IRS data retrieval mechanism that they have inside of their application. But in terms of the CSS profile, you're required to manually input information. So this would be a good slide to go back to if you want to know the differences a little bit further if you want to watch the recording. Some examples of colleges that require the CSS profile is going to be Boston College, Elon University, Lake Forest here in the northern suburbs of Illinois. New this year, and I want to put this on everybody's radar since Madison is a very popular school to apply to at DePaul College Prep, the University of Wisconsin-Madison is now requiring the CSS profile. So this is not an exhaustive list of all of the schools that require CSS profile. On our links guide, we will include a list to see so you can see which schools require it. But new this year is Wisconsin-Madison. So that's a big change for the students who will be applying there. Now, the last couple of things that I'm going to touch on before I turn it over to Ms. Janik is going to be some terminology you might hear from colleges as they talk about their financial aid. Sometimes you'll hear them say, well, you are a need-blind institution. Some say that they are need-aware. And this is just referring to how they are going to be looking at your financial aid information versus your applicant. So schools like Harvard, Columbia, and Davidson are going to be need blind. So they are not going to pay attention to the student's level of need as they look at their application. And they do this in hopes to make sure that like the cost and how much a student can or cannot pay is not put into consideration while they make their decision about their application. Sometimes these schools will meet full need with no loans. Sometimes they'll meet full need without loans. And sometimes there's no guarantee. There are about 116 schools that are need blind, and only about 50 or so are no loan schools. Now, schools like University of Miami and Wake Forest are actually going to be paying attention to your level of need as they consider your student's application as well. So they are considering whether or not how much your family can afford or put towards your education. So a good example, like I said, is Miami and Wake Forest. Just a caveat here is that just because a school is need blind doesn't necessarily automatically mean that it is going to be a better financial aid award. That's, you know, as you consider that, it would be great if college could be free for most students, but that's not necessarily going to be the case. And doing your CSS and FAFSA will help make sure that the cost of college is going to be met in the best way possible, whether they are need blind or need aware. All right, so last thing that I will talk about is that I know we do have some students who are utilizing early decision. The biggest thing that you want to think about with early decision is make sure you understand your individual college's deadlines for financial aid applications. So most of the time they have a November 15th priority application deadline, so that they can consider whether or not, as they consider your application for early decision, that they will be able to possibly offer a financial aid package as they give out decisions if you are accepted. Many colleges will work with you to provide you an early financial aid assessment. You would just have to contact their financial aid office and they would be able to provide that as well. So early decision is a wonderful option, but the biggest thing that you want to pay attention to is those deadlines for any financial aid applications, because it is the college's hope to have a, if they have a decision for you, that they can follow quickly behind with a financial aid offer. So I'm going to be throwing it over to Miss Janik at this time to kind of walk us through the FAFSA.
All right. My name is Andrea Janik. I'm one of the school counselors again, and I'll be covering the FAFSA. FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and this is going to be the first step in most students' financial aid process. The FAFSA collects a bunch of information from the student and the parent, and they use all of that information to calculate a student aid index number. And this number is going to determine what federal and state programs your student is eligible for while they are enrolling in college. The form opens most years on October 1st. If any of you have some older students that are in college currently, you'll know the past couple years it opened up a little later, but it is open now. And typically will be out around October 1st, and it is available on FAFSA.gov. There's going to be two different sections on the form. So the students will have a section where they fill out their information, and then the parents will also fill out a separate portion of the form. You are going to be using tax information from 2 years prior. So if your student is starting college in the 26-27 school year, you're going to be using tax information from 2024. The FAFSA over the years has gotten a lot simpler since they've started implementing the direct data exchange. I'll get more into that later, but essentially that's going to be pulling your tax information directly from the IRS and putting that onto your FAFSA form. That way you're not having to input all of that manually. We can go to the next slide. So for the different types of aid that the FAFSA is determining eligibility for, the first type is gift aid, and this is going to be your free money. The two big programs that FAFSA is measuring for is the Pell Grant and the MAP Grant. Both of these are going to be based off of a family's financial need. The Pell Award is through the federal government, so this can be used in any state, and it is awarded up to $7,395, and the Pell Grant can be used for anything included in the cost of attendance. The MAP grant is a grant through the state of Illinois, so if your student is eligible for this award, they do need to attend college in Illinois in order to use it. And the MAP grant can only be used for tuition and fees. We can go to the next slide. We call the second type of aid that the FAFSA is looking for self-help aid, and that's because it will require a little bit more responsibility on the student's end. So this is going to be financial aid that is either borrowed or earned by the student. The first program is Federal Work Study, and this is only available for campuses that participate in the program. However, if your student is eligible for Federal Work Study and is interested in working while they're in college, I think this is a great opportunity. You'll see on the student's financial aid offer if they're eligible for the program, that's typically listed there, but the amount will vary depending on the college. The big thing with federal work study is even though that amount is included on the student's financial aid offer, students do need to actually apply for and receive a job offer in order to earn those funds. The other nice thing about federal work study is since this is a campus-based program, the employer is going to understand that the student's number one priority is being a student. So this is a great way to get a good school and work balance. The next types of aid that may be offered to the student are going to be loans. There are a couple different loans that could be offered. The first is a federal subsidized loans. These are going to be need-based. And this is because the federal government is going to be paying for the interest on these loans while the student is in school during grace period and then during authorized periods of deferment. For the subsidized loans, these are in the student's name, so the student is responsible for paying these back once they are done with school. For federal unsubsidized loans, these are not need-based, so all students would be eligible for taking out unsubsidized loans if they are interested. These are also in the student's name, so the student is responsible for repaying. And the student is also responsible for the interest while they are in school. Students typically don't need to start paying these back until they are no longer enrolled in the school. However, that interest will be building while they are at school. And then lastly, on a financial aid offer, you may see a PLUS loan listed. Parents, these are something to be aware of because this would be a loan in your name. So the parent would be responsible for repaying these loans back, and these are going to be credit-based. All right. So the first step in filling out your FAFSA is creating your FSA ID, which is essentially your username and password for the FAFSA. This is how you're going to start the form, and then this is also how you're going to confirm and sign the form at the end of the process. The student and parents, potentially one or both, I'll get into that a little bit later, will need to create an account. With the FSA IDs, these are tied to your social security number. So if you have older students who are already in college and you already filled out the FAFSA, you may already have an FSA ID created. You can only create one account since they are tied to your social security number. When your student is making their account, please have them use a personal email address. I know a lot of them think to use their DePaul email address automatically. However, they do lose access to that email after they graduate from DePaul, and they will need their FSA ID all 4 years in college, potentially grad school. So please make sure they're using a personal email and make sure you're writing it down and have it located in a safe space in case you need to find it later. So for the parent information on the FAFSA, most students will need to include parental information on the form. For financial aid purposes, for FAFSA purposes, the only people who should be putting information in the parent section on the FAFSA are going to be biological parents, adoptive parents, or a step parent if they are married to a biological or adoptive parent. We have some other people listed who may be parents, guardians of students. However, their information should not be going on the FAFSA. So this would be legal guardians, foster parents, other family members, friends, or other people who are claiming the student on their taxes. They are not supposed to be putting their information on the FAFSA form. So if you have a question about who should be including information on the FAFSA, at the end of the presentation, we're going to include contact information for our ISAC core rep. That would be a great person to reach out to if you have questions on who should be providing information on the form. So for parents who file taxes jointly, only one parent will need, one of the tax filers will need an FSA ID. This is because since your taxes are filed together, just one person's information will be able to pull both of the tax informations and place it onto the FAFSA. If parents are married but they file separately, or if biological parents are not married but living together, both parents will need to create their own FSA ID account so they can individually provide information on the FAFSA form. We can go. Thank you. If parents are separated, the parent that's going to be listed, well, only one parent is going to be listing information on the FAFSA. So the contributor for the FAFSA is going to be the parent that the student lives with the most. If the student is living with both parents 50-50, then the contributor is going to be the parent who provides the most financial support. If the parent who is providing information on the FAFSA has remarried, the parent spouse is also required to be included on the form. And then in the next slide, if you're confused about who needs to be providing information, Federal Student Aid has a tool that you can use. You just input information based on the questions that they ask, and they'll let you know who needs to include their information on the student's form. So this is super helpful if you have questions about who needs to be providing information. Okay, so for completing the 26-27 FAFSA, as Ms. Mondro said, we want to try to complete the FAFSA as soon as we can after October 1st. However, you don't have to rush to get that in immediately. We are hosting a workshop on November 5th, which is a great opportunity to get some assistance filling out the form if you have any questions. The college counselors will be there. I'll be there, a couple other school counselors. And then we're also going to have ISAC Corps reps from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission who can help answer any questions you have while you're working through the form. For the 26-27 FAFSA, you're going to need 2024 income information to be included on the form. I'm going to get into this in the next couple slides, but the FAFSA is a roles-based form. So the student is going to work on their section through their FSA ID, and then an invite will be sent over to the parents, and they're going to fill out their portion of the form. Ideally, the student is going to start their section first. However, if the parent starts their section first, then they will need to provide some of the student information in their section. We can go to the next slide. So some materials to gather for your FAFSA. You'll need your FSA ID accounts. Students and parents will need their social security number, and then any current bank statements or records of investments, information on businesses, stocks, bonds, and other investments. And then if you are a permanent resident, you will need your permanent resident card. So for the student section of the FAFSA, they're going to log in with their FSA ID. They'll fill out some identity and contact information, just basic demographic information. Students will also provide financial information. So if your student worked in 2024 and filed taxes, they're also going to include their financial information on the FAFSA. They'll also need a list of the colleges that they're going to be applying to. They can list up to 20 schools. If your student is applying to more than 20 schools, they can add additional schools after the FAFSA has been submitted. They'll make a revision and they can add additional schools if they're applying to more than 20. Lastly, the student will review their portion of the form and then sign with their FSA ID. And then once the student signs, the parents will get an invite to complete their portion. Parents will also fill out basic demographic information. You're going to also provide financial information. And can we click one more time, Miss Mondro? So like I mentioned earlier, for financial information, it's going to be pulled directly from the IRS using the direct data exchange. Parents, you do need to consent to allowing the IRS to send this information to the federal student aid. However, this is mandatory. If you do not consent to this, unfortunately, you're not eligible for any federal student aid, and you do need to consent to this even if you are not required to file taxes. The form will also ask about marital status and your household size, your state of legal residence. After you get that all filled out, again, you'll sign just like the student using your FSA ID. So we're going to go over some frequently asked questions that we get. A big question a lot of time is, what assets do I need to include? Miss Mondro, we can click through these. We're going to want to include savings, stocks, bonds, other real estate. So you do not need to include the home in which you live, but if you have any additional properties, those do need to be listed. You'll also need to include any information on businesses if your business has more than 100 full-time employees. And then lastly, if you have a 529 plan for the student filing the FAFSA, those do need to be listed on the FAFSA as well. For assets that we're not going to include on the FAFSA, you're not going to include the value of the home in which you live. You're not going to include retirement accounts, insurance plans, annuities. If you hold any 529 plans for other children, those do not need to be listed. And then if you have a business but it has less than 100 employees, then that does not need to be listed on the FAFSA. And then lastly, we get a lot of questions about this as well. Students with multiple or families with multiple students attending college, they do need to fill out a FAFSA per student. So if you have a couple kids in college, unfortunately, you do need to fill out a FAFSA for each student individually. So once the student has completed their section, this is what the screen will look like. They'll get a confirmation that their portion is complete, but now we're waiting on your parents' information. So here you can see the status states that the invites have been sent over to the parents. That means it's time for them to work on their section of the form. We can click to the next slide. So after the invite is sent over to the parents and the parents fill out their portion, this is what they're going to see. So congratulations, FAFSA form is complete. The student's going to get an email confirmation that you filled out your portion. The student will also get updates on processing once the form has been processed and sent over to the schools. Schools will then review the information from the FAFSA, and typically they do take a while. In the spring is when students will start receiving those financial aid offers for the colleges that they applied to. So just to go over the timeline again, students and parents will work on creating an FSA ID. The student's going to complete their section first, then the invitation will be sent over to the parents. They can complete their section, and then you should get the confirmation page indicating that your FAFSA has been completed and is ready for processing. Some other helpful tips: Google Chrome we've noticed has provided the most consistent performance when working on the form. We've noticed in the past sometimes the form goes down, but Google Chrome tends to work the best. And then it is challenging to complete the FAFSA on a tablet. We do recommend working on a desktop or a laptop in order to get the most consistent experience. So if you're coming to that workshop on on November 5th, please bring a laptop if you can. That'll be the easiest device to work off of. And then lastly, just don't use any autocomplete that you might have on your laptop saved. Don't use that to enter any information. Make sure you're manually entering that in. Okay, so though the FAFSA collects a lot of information, there may be some special circumstances that are not reflected on the form. So when that is the case, we want to make sure that the colleges are aware of those situations and can take that into account when they're considering financial aid. So this must be something that you're able to document, and considerations will vary from school to school. However, if there's a change in income, if a parent has maybe lost a job, if there's something going on health-wise that is requiring some finances to be contributed to that, those are things you're going to want to communicate to financial aid offices that the student is applying. If we click to the next slide, there are some examples of special circumstances. Unfortunately, with these, there's not a way to submit this to all schools at once. You do need to work individually with each university in filling out these forms. A lot of them are located just on the school's website, but if you're having trouble finding them, you can always reach out to the financial aid office to talk to one of their representatives. One thing I will say, if you're going to work with a university on a special circumstance, make sure your student has already completed their college application prior to reaching out to the financial aid office about this. And then I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Kaushal.
Hello. So we're doing really great on time. We have about 15 more minutes. I think we're going to stay within that window for you all. Here are some tips and tricks to make some smart money moves for junior and senior families. Junior families, you have a little more time, but for senior families and junior families right now, we really recommend that you're thinking about financial fit, no matter your income bracket. But depending on your income bracket, your strategy might differ a little bit. So for families below $75,000, 75, well, yeah, is that right? 75,000, yeah. You're eligible usually for the full Pell and MAP grant. You want to look at schools that meet a high percentage of need. So when we talked about that Big J consulting tool, that's one tool that you can utilize to compare which schools might actually provide more percentage of need for your student. And then Ms. Mondra also mentioned like no loan schools, full need schools. And you can also consider some of those buyers and seller schools. So those schools like University of Nebraska, that base price are going to be just a little cheaper already. Families in the range of up to 200,000, there are some strategies that you can use to lower your SAI. For example, this is more for junior families or even sophomore families. When your student has assets, for example, a savings account or a 529 in their name, or perhaps a trust account, they're kind of put at a higher assessment than a parent asset. So that's something to think about as far as your SAI goes. More importantly, though, for our middle income families, you want to compare those merit scholarship offers from school to school. And that Big J consulting tool can help you get a gauge on how much merit money is offered to what percentage of students. So for example, if a school only gives like 10% merit money, it's probably not going to give your student any merit scholarships. However, if they give 80% of their students merit money, that's going to be a better bet that they're going to get some money. And one school that comes to mind is Mizzou, for example. They're very transparent and clear that they are going to give you some merit money. You can tell on their website. So that's kind of something you might want to look into now. So you have enough time to compare. You can also appeal if your circumstances have changed since 2024. So for example, with those special circumstances, if you lost a job since your child was a sophomore, or if you're taking care of an elderly grandparent, those sorts of things, you can talk to each individual college of interest to figure out if you might qualify for more need-based aid. Additionally, I feel like colleges are becoming more aware that being in that middle income area is kind of a squeeze. You have enough money maybe to pay for college, but not enough to pay full price. So places like Vanderbilt, Notre Dame, Northwestern, they're offering more merit money, or like I guess I would say they're like actually upping their need-based. Let me clarify, their need-based aid. Even though you might think you don't really have a need at a $200,000 family range, depending on how many children you have, Northwestern or Vanderbilt have made promises to middle income families that if their child gets in, that they could qualify for some need-based aid. For families above $200,000, this is where you're going to really want to be comparing your offers and also just kind of sleuthing and trying to figure out, like, is my child going to get merit money, or is this school only provide need-based aid and we're not going to qualify for need-based aid? Again, that Big J consulting tool is really great for that. And again, if anything has changed in your family, let's say you're a business owner and some years your business is really great and some years it's not, that's a really good idea for you to talk to the financial aid offices at the schools you're most interested in. You can go to the next slide. Other ways to save that you can use as a savvy consumer, because in this process, you really are the consumer. You're paying for this education. One, if your student is in the top 20% of a college admitted class, they're more likely to get some merit money. So if a college, the average bracket is a 3.5 to a 3.8, and your child has a 4.0, most likely you could leverage that to try to get them some more merit money at that school. I come to mind a lot of like Southern schools that actually, like University of Alabama, have really high scholarship money at the top of GPA and test score bracket that is posted on their website. So that's something to consider. Your child can also look at honors programs at colleges. Not all of them give scholarship money, but some do. Some also additionally might give them grants to study abroad or grants to have an internship. So there's some other tangible financial benefits that sometimes come with honors programs. Scholarships for campus visits. Some colleges actually just give you $1,000 for visiting if you end up attending there, or if you complete your FAFSA. Even if you might not be eligible for need-based aid, that FAFSA can help them figure out, like, I might want to try to encourage this family to come. I see that they maybe make a little more money and we need some people at this income bracket. So they might give you a little extra money for completing that FAFSA early. Appeals process. You can inquire from a college if you're comparing two similar colleges and one maybe offered you more merit money. It's okay to ask about an appeal, but usually they'll have their own process. So you want to look into what that process is and be realistic, because appeals usually don't lead to like, I'm going to get like $20,000 more for my child. It could be like a couple thousand, but it's worth considering if that little bit of money could possibly help your family. Now, we mentioned this before, but just to reinforce, colleges that just cost lower or offer more merit money, it's going to be a better financial fit if you're trying to save money for other things like retirement or a car for your child eventually. So brand name isn't always the best when it comes to finances, as we mentioned before. But there's some other things you can consider too outside of brand name that would still make a school good value for the money you're going to put in. Additionally, when mid-year transcripts come out, so that's around January, or if your student gets a new test score, often you can send those in and inquire about getting additional merit money. You don't want to wait too long because that pool of money at each institution runs out. So if it's like May and you're asking, it might not be as successful if you send a test score in November or January. So that's something to think about as far as timelines go. Next. Okay, private scholarships, they do exist. So the biggest tip that I would recommend, because this happens every year, is students need to apply early. By the time it comes to March, April, May, and we have students come in our office and they're asking me, "Ooh, I need scholarships to make this happen." Scholarships have kind of ended at that time. There's some trickle of scholarships in March, April, and May, but truly they're all happening right now. So October, November, December, January, February, March, we still have some. But by the time you get to April, May, it's very slim. So as far as your private scholarship strategy goes, and I was actually talking to a family about this today, information overload about scholarships. It's hard to figure out where to start. it's hard to figure out what's worth your time. And this is where a parent can really be helpful by strategizing and sitting down with the student once a week, picking out some scholarships to apply to. And every week it gets easier because it's the same information, usually per scholarship or a similar essay. But you've got to be persistent, just like when you're looking for a job and you have to apply for 50 jobs to get that one job. It is worth it though, because I've seen students be able to get their own full ride essentially because they keep plugging away and filling out scholarships. So the best way to approach it, first, you want to examine your close personal ties. Do you have an employer that offers a scholarship like Microsoft? Are you in a union? Are you in community organization like the Boys and Girls Club has a scholarship? Big Shoulders has a STEM scholarship. So look really, really close to what your family is involved in first. Religious institutions, synagogues, churches, your alderman, your ward, or any sororities or fraternities that you are part of. So examine everything about your child and your family first at the personal level. Next, you can look at organizations like the Elks, Rotary clubs, small government organizations, city and county nonprofits. So that's going to be your next level. For example, the City of Chicago Treasurer for a while offered a scholarship every year for different heritage months, like Latino Heritage Month. They've kind of shifted that a little bit, but those are the kind of organizations that you could look to. Next would be state level. So Illinois Students Assistance Commission, Illinois Association for College Counseling, those sorts of associations oftentimes may have a strategic scholarship for your student to apply to. And then next, the big ones, so those national scholarships like Amazon, McDonald's, Foot Locker, Taco Bell, they're very large. They are very hard to win. That doesn't mean you shouldn't apply. We actually had a student win Taco Bell Live Más last year, which is crazy. I've had a student win Burger King before. I've had a student win Gates before. So you really never know. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do those really large scholarships, but those should not be the only ones your child does if they really are looking for extra financial support. Additionally, if they're like lotto style scholarships where they don't have to do an essay, our kids love those. They're like, no essay. Think about how many kids are doing those. And it's just the same percentage as if you would win the lotto. Of course, you still got to play to win. I have had a kid win a FastWeb like lotto style scholarship before, but those are kind of few and far between. So we would not recommend your student spends all their time doing those like one click kind of scholarships. Okay, next slide. So your scholarship search. This is just a tool with some strategic scholarships on the DePaul Prep College website under our college counseling page. So it has several different websites that students tend to use for scholarships. My favorites tend to be Going Merry, which is really nice. It gives you the amount of time a scholarship might take. It tells you how competitive it might be. Scholarships.com looks pretty old, but the scholarships are actually really good on it and link directly to the scholarship. And there's a real person working in the north suburbs who monitors it to make sure the scholarships are still around. So that's a benefit. And then there's other ones that maybe aren't so great, but are useful. FastWeb is useful, but it's very overwhelming. So your child can poke around on some of these websites to get an idea of what they might be eligible for. In the next tab on that same scholarship document, we also have some strategic scholarships that we check year to year that have been won by students in the past and are more targeted for our population. Next slide. If you are a hyper spreadsheet person like we are, we love the spreadsheets. We have an application organizer for scholarships. The tab has instructions in the front end, everything that you might need to collect to get your student organized before applying for scholarships. There's a resource tab, and you can even mark out like what scholarship your child applied for, what was the result, like what's the date it's due. So if this would help you, it's available. It'll be in the resources to make a forced copy for yourself. Next slide. Okay. Now, when you're picking a college, you and the financial aid department are going to be partners in this final process. And when you're looking at offers, or even when you're thinking about this list that you have in front of you for our senior families, there are some other things that you as a parent or a family might want to consider that your student is not thinking about. So one of them, return on investment. There's a lot of good information available for that right now. So Money Magazine has some really good lists. Is the college actually retaining students? if kids are not coming back after their freshman year, that could be a problem that would make your student go to school longer if they have to transfer. So that's one data point to look at. What's the graduation rate? The national rate is a little under 60%. So if a school has a graduation rate of 4 years and it's 80%, that might be a better choice where your student is actually going to succeed. You can also dig into what's the rate for different majors at a school. Maybe all the humanities majors are graduating, but the business majors are not. So you might want to ask, like, why? What's happening at that particular school? And would these be a good fit for my student? Also, very important, career or grad school placement rates. A lot of schools are very transparent about, I mean, I think like George Washington or American, one of them has a really cool website where you can see exactly where their students go. Like, what organizations do they go to, even by particular major? What nonprofit are they going to? What business or finance company are they going to? So you can get that information and see, is this really worth our money? Because even if it's not a brand name school, if they have these ROI points, that could be really worth your time because you know they're going to graduate. You know they're going to get those career connections. Percent of loans versus grants. You can find that on Big J Consulting and compare that. But you can also find a school's average debt per student. So if students have more than the average amount of debt from student loans, that's a problem. So if you're seeing students like have $100,000 in debt from a bachelor's, that's way too much. And you might want to consider a different school. Another tricky thing about colleges is sometimes freshman scholarships are not renewable. So they might package your student really well for the first year, and then that money is gone. So read those scholarship letters, see what the stipulation is for GPA so that you know what's coming for the next year. Additionally, kids don't like to apply for scholarships when they get to college, very busy. There's a lot of scholarships sophomore, junior, senior year by department. So if your student is like thirsty, they're a hard worker, and they're willing to put in the effort to apply for scholarships, they're not going to have a lot of competition. So we highly suggest they look at scholarships throughout college. And any additional scholarship opportunities, you want to look at the college's websites their student is applying to and look at their scholarship page. Likely your child will need to apply for school-based institutional scholarships anywhere between now to February is the latest. So when your student gets an acceptance letter, look and see, like, what's the scholarship deadline for institutional scholarships? Because somewhere between December and February, it's going to be gone. Additionally, a tip from like Boston University, the admissions officer told me that even if a student was applying for regular decision, they should admit before the RD date. I believe she said December 1st, so they can be considered for the big scholarships. So that's something to look at as well. If you have any kids doing RD, is like, look at their scholarship deadlines. Will it hurt them if they wait too long? Next slide, and I'm almost done. Okay, deadlines. That was my whole point in the last slide. It's really important that you know each college's priority deadlines. And yes, your student should be the one who's like running that, but you are the nudger as well. So you can say like, hey, I see December 1st is coming up. Let's look at your portals, let's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Help them kind of organize if they're not great at executive functioning. Read and retain all the communications to make sure like they're not just like, oh my gosh, so many emails and texts. They might miss a huge opportunity because they're just it is overwhelming. I'm not going to lie, in their inbox with all of the thousands of emails. So they might miss a really huge opportunity. Make them a little like folder in their email or sit down with them and show them how to do that. Make sure they're meeting their merit scholarship and admission deadlines. And then I'll need deadlines for supplemental documents so they don't miss out on what they need to do. Next. Working with financial aid officers, they actually want to partner with you. They want you to come to the school. So it's okay to ask questions. Students and their parents have the primary responsibility to pay for college to the extent that they are able. Financial aid assessments are not a cash flow, so they can't just give you all the money that you need always. So that's something to really evaluate because each college is going to have a different financial base and is going to be assessing how much you could possibly pay based on the FAFSA, based on the CSS. Special circumstances that we mentioned is vital. So communication is really important. They want to be your advocate. So you can talk to them. If you call without your student, you might have a problem. So just make sure to try to do it together because the student ultimately is going to be that point of contact once they go to college for things like financial aid. So help them get acclimated to that conversation with financial aid. Next slide. All right. With only 4 minutes over, good job, team. We have a great support event for you all. So Rams are ready. That's Wednesday, November 5th. So if you are a senior family and you need some help with FAFSA, we are going to be here in person to assist you. Positive note, I had a couple families tell me today as well that FAFSA was so easy that they were worried they did something wrong. They were like, it was too easy. What was it? What was supposed to happen? In the past, it has been a little bit rocky, but I guess this year is a little better. So that's good. If you could create your FSA ID, so that's that login in advance of the workshop, that's going to be best. So they can dig right into the application. Although new update, I've heard that FSA IDs are getting approved really quickly, whereas in the past they took a couple days. So that's a new update as well. Links from tonight's presentation will be in the live stream box, and recording will be immediately available after it ends, and we'll send it out as well. So if you're watching this and you are wondering, like, what did these people say? Or I spaced out because I was cooking my mac and cheese. You can go back to the recording and look at it. And if you have specific questions, you can ask a college counselor. If you have really in-depth financial questions, you might want to consider asking someone in your financial life that's a professional. But we can advise you and direct you in the right direction. So thank you very much. And then I'm going to let Ms. Mondro take over for the questions that we had.
Yeah, so before we did the live stream, we did ask if there were any questions. So I'll just read them out and we can kind of respond to them. So the first question that we received from a family is, do kids need to set up an account before parents start FAFSA? And I think Ms. Janik did a wonderful job of sort of kind of walking through the steps of that. I have found it easier that if the student creates their FSA ID and does their part of the FAFSA first and invites the parent, it usually runs really smoothly. I actually worked with one of my students to do this, and all you simply need to do to invite a parent is to actually add their email address. So it's very much streamlined and very easy to do. The second question that we received, and I think Ms. Koshel covered this one, but if you have anything else to add, is what is the best way to find scholarship information? And I think, like I said, I think Ms. Koshel did a wonderful job. There are tons of resources available. It's just finding the right strategy. Anything
I
else?
have one more tip that I forgot. So
Yeah.
this is fun, but also you have to be okay with AI. So you can also use AI. So you could put in, like, my child is an Irish dancer with a 3.5 and they were born in another country. So whatever like the characteristics are that you come up with, and you can put it in AI and try to like pop out some scholarships as well, or give you some guidelines like, where can I find such and such? Because I do feel in this given age, the internet is too much. So any kind of like slimming down of or resources we can get can be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful use of AI. So those are all of the questions that we had. So I just wanted to say thank you to Ms. Janik and Ms. Koshel for being here this evening. Like I said, at the end of this, we're going to be sending out a document that has all of the links that we have talked about, including our ISAC person as well. So we will be sending that out. Usually we put that in Maya, and then I'll send the email out and the link to the live stream all through student email and family emails as well. So thank you guys for being here. We're going to end our live stream now, and have a good rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.